Well, the US is continuing to deny any involvement in an alleged plot to kidnap the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and overthrow his government. Authorities in Venezuela say they have detained a pair of American citizens working with a US veteran who has claimed responsibility for a failed armed incursion. Well, for more on the fallout from this extraordinary situation, I'm joined from London by Diego Moya-Ocampos. He's an analyst with the America's country risk team at IHS Markit. Now, Diego, what's the latest information on what really happened? Who were this group and what were they trying to do?
Yes, Yvonne, thank you very much. The circumstances surrounding this event remain unclear. What we know so far is that it was an operation which was poorly planned, that the U.S. government had no involvement, that the Colombian government had no involvement, and apparently opposition leader Juan Guaidó, the head of the National Assembly, who is recognized as the interim constitutional president by the EU, by the US, and most Latin American countries, had nothing to do with it as well. The whole operation apparently, which was also integrated by former members, mid-ranks of police and military security forces, some of them deserted security forces, was aimed to try to topple Nicolás Maduro.
Can you tell us more?
In the beginning.
Yeah, can you tell us more about who the group behind this act was? One of the US Special Forces veteran has claimed responsibility, Jordan Goudreau. Who is he?
The circumstances are not clear. What we know is that it's a US-based security company in Florida, and that he was acting on his own with these mid-rank former Venezuelan police and military officers. But what we know is that there was no involvement by the U.S., by the Venezuelan opposition, and indeed by the Colombian government. And obviously, this group had been infiltrated since the beginning, so there's some role of actually Maduro's regime in the whole thing, at least steering the process and allowing it to grow.
The latest we're hearing, though, that even though Juan Guaidó has denied allegations that he's linked to the group, but there are reports that suggest otherwise.
Well, Juan Guaidó has denied he had anything to do with it. Initially, this gentleman, Jordan Goudreau, also said that Guaidó had nothing to do with it. Apparently, he changed his version along the way. What we know as a fact is that the whole operation was poorly planned and that there was a high level of infiltration by Maduro's administration.
Well, the country has been suffering and has been hit hard economically, not helped by sanctions imposed by the US in recent years by a Trump administration who really want Maduro out.
Yes, absolutely. Basically, what is here at stage is there's a U.S. proposal and a Venezuelan opposition proposal led by Guaidó for Maduro's administration and for the military to form a government of emergency with Maduro stepping down, and that government of emergency creating the conditions for early presidential elections. We have to remember that Nicolás Maduro was elected in May 2018 for 6 more years, but there were severe allegations of electoral fraud. That led to the US, the EU, and most Latin American countries to recognize Guaidó as the legitimate president of Venezuela and to not recognize Nicolás Maduro. We have also have to remember that there are very strong allegations by EU and US law enforcement agencies which point that Maduro's administration and top government officials of his regime are linked with drug trafficking organizations and are involved in money laundering in large scale with terrorist organizations and Colombian insurgent groups, including the ELN, Colombia, and Lebanese-based Hezbollah.
So, Diego, what happens now to those who are being detained, including those 2 Americans?
Well, unfortunately, the 2 Americans are going to be used as bargaining chips, which is quite unfortunate because that would most likely complicate even more that a feasible negotiation between the Venezuelan opposition and the regime will certainly have a peaceful electoral solution. The whole operation, which again, as we said, as Goudreau denied, has no links with the U.S. government or the Colombian government, will be tried to frame by Maduro's administration as having some sort of U.S. involvement. And what makes the whole situation more dire or more sad is that most of the testimonies that are creating this narrative that we're seeing around the media and social networks are being obtained by systematic torture of these mid-rank police and military officers, which are under detention. We have to remember that Maduro's administration has systematically violated human rights of current detainees. At the moment, there are around 350 political prisoners in Venezuela, half of which are members of security forces, and some of these security forces are aligned in trying to restore democratic and constitutional order in Venezuela. But in what they differ with Guaidó is that while Guaidó is trying to propose an electoral solution, some of these groups are proposing a violent solution.
Meanwhile, Diego, Maduro and Guaidó, it appears, have been competing to combat the effects of coronavirus. What's being done to fight the pandemic there?
Well, the first thing is there's no transparency over exactly where we are. And that's something that possibly could have influenced these mid-ranks aligned with this apparent private security company to sort of conduct this operation in a very poorly planned, in the expectation that it would take place before the COVID-19 spread was all over the place in Venezuela. What we know is that it has been poorly planned. What we know is that Venezuela has one of the most weak public and indeed private sector health systems, and is potentially, along with Haiti, the countries less capable of dealing with COVID-19 spread in the whole region. And the figures that the government has been providing so far indicate that they're not transparent, but that certainly they're weeks before Brazil, Peru, or Ecuador, other countries which so far have been more affected. The main problem in Venezuela now is fuel shortages, food shortages, shortage of essential goods, including medicines, the whole collapse of the health system, not because of coronavirus, but because of widespread corruption and mismanagement, and indeed the humanitarian crisis, which has forced a massive migration into the region only comparable with Syria.
Indeed, a crisis before even the pandemic arrived. Diego Moya-Ocampos, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Anytime. Always a pleasure, Yvonne. Cheers.